So first, let's start off with how would you describe the emptiness that people with BPD feel?
I would describe it by thinking of emptiness on a continuum. So I think on one hand, we might think about boredom, which might be chronic boredom. And I think when we think about individuals with a diagnosis of BPD, we can think about that impulsive behavior or sometimes that thrill seeking as a way to get some distance from that boredom, because that can feel really, really uncomfortable. So on the one hand, I think that feels like boredom. All the way on the other side, I think it feels very like this existential dread. Like life is meaningless, I'm meaningless, everything is meaningless. Like, why would I even want to exist? So I think for different people, it's going to look really different. And again, like all of the symptoms, again, we can think of them on a continuum. They might be very mild, things that only come up occasionally, or they may be things that come up all the time and really affect our ability to cope well, connect with others. Maybe they affect our work or our ability to just to live in a healthier way.
Mm-hmm. My question to you, now I'm thinking about it, you said the dread, the way you described the opposite end, hopelessness and dread. Now, I have it when things don't go as well in my life and I'm struggling.
Mm-hmm.
I do wake up, and it's even when I was younger, a lot younger. I do wake up in the morning with this intense dread. And sometimes, like, I have to run to the gym to get rid of it. Not that it always helps. But there is that dread, that underlying dread. I wake up with it in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that that's part of the emptiness? Or is that something totally just because I'm having issues in my life? And
I definitely think it can be both. I think that sometimes people wake up with feeling a lot of anxiety about the day ahead. And I think that can be a part of that emptiness that sometimes people experience. I also think that that dread can sometimes be linked to depression. You know, like, oh, it's another day, I'm awake again. And what's the day going to be like? Are things going to go relatively well, or are they going to be a little more challenging and difficult? So I think it can definitely be both. And I think absolutely you're correct. It can be a part of that emptiness that people sometimes feel.
I have another question related to it. What about loneliness? What about feeling so alone in the world? Is that part of it?
Absolutely. Oh, I think it definitely is. I think it definitely is. I think loneliness, I think about not feeling connected to people around us. And that could mean family members, or it could mean our friend group, or maybe when we think about the people we work with, all of that might apply. So that loneliness that comes from either genuine disconnection or maybe perceived disconnection. Like, I feel like I don't fit in, but maybe the experience of everyone around us is, you're a perfect fit. Like, you're our people. We love you. Like, yes, you're a part of our family, or you're an important part of our friend group. But sometimes we feel disconnected, or we feel lonely, even though other people, if they were to take a look at our lives or our days, would say, no, you're very connected. You know, you're a great fit. Like, yes, of course you're wanted. You're an important part of our day.
So what if you feel, when you're around people, you feel connected, but once you leave, you feel totally alone? Like that loneliness washes over you and you feel like you're all alone in this world and you got no support. And then let's say half an hour ago you were with your friends, um, and you felt like you have someone, but then as soon as you leave, you just feel that it's loneliness and dread washing over you. Is that part of this feeling of emptiness, or is that something totally different?
I think it absolutely can be. And I think that that's something that's also really common when we think about the experience of BPD. I think it's also a part of emotional sensitivity. We can kind of understand that in that way as well. That for emotionally sensitive people, it can be really tough when an event ends, or a day ends, or a date ends, and we feel very connected, feel very validated or understood during that time that we're with other people, especially if other people are really validating and very connecting. And then it's tough when we're alone with our thoughts, and we're alone with our emotions, and we're alone with ourselves. So yeah, I think that that can also be understood as potentially a part of that loneliness that we may be experiencing. But I think, again, it's also true when we think about the experience of just being an emotionally sensitive person. So we can kind of normalize that absolutely makes sense. We don't have to tie it to a diagnosis or anything. We can just say, like, yeah, it's really sad when I'm hanging out with my friends and I'm having such a great time, and then that period ends. Like, that's really sad. Like, as an emotionally sensitive person, that can be something really difficult to experience. Like, oh, like I was having so much fun earlier. I was feeling so connected, and now I'm feeling a little less so.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
So
that
yeah,
makes sense.
absolutely. I think it definitely can be a part of that emptiness. Definitely.
And so, how do you deal with it? What is a way of, I guess, filling the emptiness, or getting rid of the emptiness, or just maybe toning it down a bit? What do you do?
Absolutely. So one of the things, so I think about from a DBT perspective, and
Hmm.
I also therapy or treatment I really love is called logotherapy, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. But from a DBT perspective, I think it's important to just get back to those two mindfulness skills of observe and describe. I think there's something, again, inherently healthy about saying, I'm feeling really disconnected from my partner or my spouse, and I'm feeling really empty right now. To observe that, mindfully observe that, and then to start describing it. So we can describe it out loud. We can describe that to ourselves as an interior experience. Maybe we journal and we describe it that way, which is so healthy, so healthy. Maybe we create some kind of art or music as a way of observing and describing that experience. So I think that's something, I think that's a great place to start. Again, you don't even have to know or be an expert in DBT to use those mindfulness skills of observe and describe, and just kind of recognize this is what's going on right here, right now. This is a moment of emptiness, or this is a moment when I'm feeling or I'm experiencing some emptiness. And then again, we can move on to that description. So I think, again, it really benefits us when we just start there, with that observe and describe. And then when I think about all that logotherapy offers. So logotherapy is a treatment that was developed by a psychiatrist who had lived through the Holocaust. And this psychiatrist lost his wife, he lost his parents, he lost an unborn child during that time period. So as you can imagine, like just an extreme time in our history as humans, but also for someone who had a career in helping people feel better. This was a time of emptiness for Viktor Frankl. So after the Holocaust, he wrote an amazing book I love to recommend to practically everyone I know, and it's called Man's Search for Meaning. And for me, personally and also professionally, I think it's a great place to start when we think about how we address that kind of emptiness. And again, however that emptiness looks, if it looks like boredom, if it looks like disconnection, if it looks like that existential dread of, here I am, I'm alive, and it's another day, and I don't know what this is going to look like, and maybe I'm going to feel disappointed, or maybe this is just going to be a really rough day. So I think about how we can use some of these ideas even today, you know. So Viktor Frankl says that there are 3 different ways that we can begin to create some meaning or purpose in our lives. And again, I think about how these ideas absolutely can relate to that experience of emptiness and how we begin to reduce those feelings of emptiness. So either reduce the amount of time we feel empty, or to reduce the intensity of the emptiness. So we can think about it in a couple of different ways. So maybe we don't get rid of it 100% and we never experience that ever again. That may not be something that is practical, is doable, but we can think about how we reduce the intensity of the experience or the duration of that emptiness. So Viktor Frankl says that we can find meaning or purpose in creating a work or doing a deed. So again, I think about that experience. So I am not an artist by any stretch. And every so often, I find a lot of meaning if I can sit down for 10, 15, or 20 minutes and paint. Doesn't have to be beautiful or brilliant or something that I ever even want to necessarily share with anyone. But that experience for me is something that can be meaningful, especially if I'm trying to, again, get back to those DBT skills of observe and describe. And that describe is a way for me to be creative. So for me, that would be painting. And again, I'm not an artist. This is not something I would ever do professionally, but it's something that does help. So that helps me to sometimes understand a thought or an emotion in a way that may be hard for me to verbally articulate with other people. So for other people, it may be, again, writing. I think journaling is so healthy. Absolutely. Marsha Linehan, I think, would say it's part of a life worth living. So writing, we can think about playing music or listening to music. Like that can be a profoundly meaningful experience. I don't know if you've seen on YouTube, I watch sometimes these song reaction videos where someone is listening to a song for the very first time. And sometimes you can see the emotion kind of just wash over them when they're listening to a particular piece of music for the first time. Like that can be a source of meaning in our lives, and not one that we want to discount. Not one that we just want to push away and say, oh, it's just a song. Everyone's heard this. Or maybe there are hundreds of reaction videos on YouTube or TikTok. Like, it's not that important. No, it's absolutely something that's very important and very meaningful. And then there's the idea of doing a deed. Like, what are we doing? What are we doing that's meaningful? You know, are we, every so often I'll leave my office and I'll walk. So my office is in downtown Waco. And so I'll leave my office, I'll start walking up and down the main street in town as a way of getting like some fresh air and exercise. And sometimes I just start picking up trash. So, you know, like something like that feels meaningful in the moment. Like, okay, I'm out, I'm paying attention to my emotional health by going for a quick walk and getting some exercise and some sunshine. But hopefully I'm also making the main street in Waco a little bit of a better place by picking up some trash. So we can even think about some meaning in doing that. That, yeah, like we live in this world that we absolutely want to care for. So what, you know, it takes all of a couple of seconds to, you know, bend down and pick up some trash and put it in the waste bin. So that can be something that for some people may help to reduce that emptiness. Like, yeah, today was tough, but I went out for 20 minutes and I picked up trash, you know, or I listened to this particular song, or I started to write a song, or I painted something, or I wrote something, you know. So the second way that Viktor Frankl says that we can create more meaning and purpose in our lives is to experience something or encounter someone. So we can think about the people we meet, the people we interact with each day, and how that can be a profoundly meaningful experience for us. Also, what can we experience? You know, what can we go out and do? What kind of experience that we can we have that's meaningful? I know I have a wonderful client who went to a concert a few months ago, and she described the experience as something that was really meaningful. So being surrounded by other people who were having as much fun as she was having. And, you know, so we can think about a group of people and everyone coming together for a particular event. Like, that encounter was something that was really meaningful to her. So I'm like, yeah, this is something to pay attention to. I want you to have more fun concerts in your future, because this is something really important to pay attention to. So what would it look like to have that meaningful experience? And we can think about the different ways in which people have meaningful experiences, like to get out in nature, to do something, to go for a hike, to go to a concert, to take a class. That can be something that's a meaningful experience. And then finally, Viktor Frankl talks about the attitude we take when we're experiencing suffering. So again, I think that can mean, for some people, emotional suffering. For other people, it might mean, for people who are living with chronic pain issues or chronic fatigue, we can think about the attitude that individual takes as they are experiencing that kind of suffering. Again, whatever it is. Now, this doesn't mean that we practice some kind of toxic positivity, that we're smiley and sunshiny and fake happy, because I don't know that that is beneficial to someone who's really suffering. But I think that there is something to this idea of, you know, today's a really hard day. I'm someone who experiences a lot of migraines. Mm-hmm. So when I experience a migraine or when I'm in some kind of pain, I can think of, what kind of attitude do I want to have during this experience? If it's whatever the experience is, if suffering is temporary and I know it's just going to last for 20 or 30 minutes, or I know, no, this is going to be a day of pretty intense suffering and I'll probably suffer for most of the day, then again, I can think about that. What kind of attitude do I want to have? Marsha Linehan might phrase the question something like, how do I want to feel about myself when the suffering is over? Like, how do I want to look back on this hour or day or maybe series of days? And how do I want to feel about how I handled that situation, that kind of suffering? You know, did I yell at my husband, or did I say something that I was going to regret later? Or, you know, did I suffer in a way that didn't violate my values or my beliefs? And again, one more time, this isn't about being fake happy or being glad that we're suffering. This is more about like, yeah, this is who I am. This is a part of life. And maybe I'm just going to lean into some acceptance today, rather than say to myself or to someone else, this shouldn't be happening. This shouldn't be happening. I hate this. I'm miserable. And I let everyone under the sun know just how unhappy I am.
Can I ask you a question?
Of course.
So say someone has, their life has fallen apart. Their financial situation, they're losing their house. They don't know where they're going to be. Mentally, it's destroying them too, right? How do they deal with the attitude part, as far as like they feel like the sky is falling, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Absolutely.
they don't have, they're gonna be homeless. They're gonna be on the streets. They don't have any support.
Right.
How do they change, and how do they change their attitude if instead of feeling so hopeless and anxious and filled with worry about the future, and the future looks so bleak? And so how do they take that and just change your attitude about it?
It's a great question. And I certainly don't want to diminish anyone's suffering or their experience of suffering in such a profound way. I think about the question of, would changing my attitude help me to reduce my suffering? And if the person says no, then I'm not going to suggest that they decide that they use this part of logotherapy to help themselves. Now, if someone says, actually, yeah, I'm facing all of this uncertainty. I don't know where I'm going to be living. I don't know what next month is going to look like as far as housing or as far as work or whatever it is. I would like to change my attitude. Then I think it's a matter of, again, going back to that question of, how do I want to feel about myself during this time period? This time period of extraordinary suffering, extraordinary pain, you know, of losing housing or whatever the problem is, you know. So how do I want to feel about myself when this is over? When I'm on the other side, because I think that hopefulness is something really important. So how do I want to feel about myself or about this situation when it's over? And again, that doesn't mean that, you know, we go into this kind of pretend mode and imagine that everything's wonderful and all of our problems are going to be solved quickly or easily, because we know that's not accurate for most people facing those kinds of problems. But how do I want to feel about myself, or how do I want to feel in this situation looking back? You know, do I want to be proud of myself that I called 211 and I looked at every single resource in my community that I could? Like, will I be proud of myself that I spent hours on the phone looking for help to pay my mortgage, or looking for other ways to solve this housing problem or something? Like, maybe that's a meaningful experience. Like, I didn't solve all of the problems and it wasn't easy, but I did everything I could to make it better. Or, again, I'll go back to like this idea from DBT. I didn't make a bad situation worse. Like, maybe I lived through this, again, this profound suffering, this extraordinarily painful experience in my life of being alive and really, really suffering and having all of this uncertainty. And I look back and I realize, you know, I didn't make a bad situation worse. I didn't engage in those behaviors that maybe I would have engaged in 6 months earlier, a year earlier, 5 years earlier. And maybe that's also could potentially be a source of meaning for someone.
Yeah. So it's logotherapy.
Logotherapy. Exactly.
By Viktor, what was the name again?
So it's Viktor Frankl. So Viktor, and then Frankl is Frankl.
Man's Search for Meaning. Wow.
Man's Search for Meaning. It is hard stuff. Really hard stuff. This is not easy. Not even close.
Thank you. And do you have a tip for someone who is suffering from the feeling of emptiness?
Mm-hmm.
Is there one thing that they could do during, like, implement in their life to stop, to kind of reduce it or bring it down a bit?
I think, and again, this is something that has helped me personally, the idea of doing something for someone else almost always gets me unstuck. When I have periods of my life when I have a little more emptiness or that existential dread of, oh, it's another day and I'm going to be encountering some kind of emotional pain during the day, if I can think about and remember that I'm a healthier Amanda, if I'm doing something for someone else, that is something that helps me, I think, almost 100% of the time.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for your wisdom. I really appreciate it. Thanks for doing this.
You're welcome.